Hello, this is Susan Poss. This is Math 102 Intermediate Algebra, and I'm going to show you the beginning, one of the ways, not the beginning one, one of the ways to solve a second degree equation. Now, if you were in a Math 101 class earlier, you learned how to solve second degree equations by factoring. So the first one I'm going to work with you is one that I'm going to work by factoring. But before I do that, let's be sure that we all understand what a quadratic equation looks like. It's always going to have a variable that's a second degree variable in there. And we are going to be expecting two answers because it's second degree. We won't always get two answers. We may only get one, but we'll be looking or expecting to get two. All right, so the first example here, x squared equals 16. I'm going to go back and work this the way you learned to work this in Chapter 6 by factoring. So when we did this by factoring, the first step was to set everything equal to 0. So the first thing you would have seen me do was subtract the 16 away so that you ended up with an x squared minus 16 on the left side of the equals mark and a 0 on the right side of the equals mark. The next thing I would have done was to factor the left side, and I hope you see that that x squared minus 16 is the difference of two squares, which factors x plus 4 and x minus 4. Then we took each factor because of something called the zero factor property. If two things multiply together to give you 0, at least one of those things has to be a 0. And then we solved each of these resulting equations, and we came up with the first answer, negative 4, and we came up, after doing a little quick solving here, with the second answer of positive 4. So there are two answers that we were expecting. All right, so we're leaving that behind. We're going on to other solving methods for second degree because not everything will factor as that one did. All right, so the first one that I'm looking at here is x squared minus 49. You will see how it's arranged. It's important that you have the second degree term on one side. I, in this case, happen to have it on the left, and the constant term on the right-hand side. So this one is arranged exactly the way I'd like to have it arranged. And let's see, so since I have it arranged properly, I'm down to step number 3, which says take the square root of each side. So you'll notice immediately that I'm doing something different here. So there is me taking the square root of each side. Remember, I'm expecting two answers at most. So where am I going to get my two answers from? Well, when you take the square root on these, you're going to have to remember to take both the principal positive root and the negative root. So you'll see me writing plus or minus in front of the square root of 49. All right, so going back and finishing up, the square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 49 is plus or minus 7. Generally, you want to write this, if you were putting it in a solution set, you might put negative 7 and positive 7 separated with a comma. So you may see different ways of writing the answer. Okay, so how is this next one different? It is still a second degree equation, and I still want to arrange it. Let me scroll up so you can see my steps, so that I have the squared term on the left and the constant term on the right. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides here, which shifts that 4 over and becomes a positive 4 on the right-hand side. Now, the thing that's a little bit different from the previous one is that this one now contains a multiplier of 2 sitting in front of the x squared. So the next thing you're going to see me doing is dividing each side by 2, because my goal is to isolate the base and the power 2. So I want the x squared all by itself. All right, so once I've done that, I'm ready now for my third step, which is take the square root of each side. Remember, we're expecting those two, whoops, that's not what I wanted, expecting those two answers. So I have to record plus or minus the square root of 2, and then taking the square root of x squared, I get x. And here are my two answers, the positive square root of 2 and the negative square root of 2. Generally, you're going to want to leave these answers in exact radical form. You don't normally put these in decimal form. All right, so moving on to something a little bit different. This one is already arranged properly. It has the second degree term on the left. You see it's actually a binomial. It's all in parentheses. And a constant on the right. So I'm ready at this point to take the square root of the left side and both the positive and negative square root of the right side. So when you take the square root of this quantity squared in parentheses, you get this quantity. And I'm going to go ahead and leave off the parentheses. So the next thing you're going to see me do is adding 12, and I'm going to go ahead and do that in my head. Notice that I'm not going inside this radical. I'm just copying that down because the square root of 12 is not 12. It's some number, 3 point something, multiple decimal places. And I'm going to do one last step, which is divide both sides by 6. So I'm going to go ahead. I am going to write that down because I want you to see how I'm putting this division on underneath everything there. And I'll probably take it back out in just a minute. Whoops, sorry, there goes my phone.